reading is right. So yes, yeah. Yeah. Could you give me confirmation yet for the transfer? Because I did get confirmation from them by email.
Okay,
Which has
let me
the right
check.
time.
Let me check.
Um,
No. WhatsApp? No.
okay.
Let me
I'll
check
forward you
by-
the email.
Yeah, no, I have.
Okay. Yeah, maybe because it's a foreign phone. But
It will take some more.
I got an email from them.
But
I got an email from them.
but it's
which
important
has
that
the correct
they know
time.
now. Yeah, they know now.
But we'll discuss it afterwards. So I'll
Okay.
forward it to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I will run on first chairperson. So that's I think a call. Whether to start on Thursday or 9:40. Then if you know anything about it, please. I don't know. No, I mean, in case there's some information that there are enemies today or anything, wait a little bit. Otherwise. It's open to information. That's right. I'll shoot it to your. Right now, it's not.
I'm looking for the paper.
Sorry. You looking for what?
My paper. Oh, the,
Should we move forward other? Yeah. I didn't see that. Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to day 5 of the school, and we'll start this morning with the continuation of Mario's lecture. So we can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. So, this is the last day of this school and of my lectures. So, the class continue our discussion about gauge supergravities. We started yesterday discussing about the construction of gauge supergravities, gauge extended supergravities. We focused on 4-dimensional extended theories. We've seen what we have done. We started from an ungauged equal 4 and greater or equal than model. Okay? In a specific Lagrangian representation, this means in a specific symplectic frame. You know, we have seen that the Lagrangian representation is not unique for an ungauged supergravity in 4 dimensions. That depends on the symplectic frame we choose, namely what we define electric and what we define magnetic, right? So we fixed an electric frame, so a symplectic frame. We fixed that symplectic frame and wrote the symplectic vector of field strengths and their magnetic dual, labeling them by Hutted indices, right? F lambda at mu, G lambda at mu, F lambda at mu, G lambda at mu. Okay. Then we know symplectic frame is Lagrangian description, okay, with a specific subgroup of the global symmetry group, okay, which describes the global symmetries of the Lagrangian. Okay, once we choose a symplectic frame, we choose also the Lagrangian and its global symmetries. Then we took a subgroup of GE and promoted it to local symmetry group of the action. Okay, and then so we ended up with an action which we called LG G naught, local invariant of the G, but unfortunately not supersymmetric. Then we discussed how to complement this new Lagrangian with extra terms. G is the overall coupling constant. Of order G and of order G squared. Right, 1, 2. Such that the resulting Lagrangian is invariant, it's invariant. supersymmetry invariant, provided invariant under the same amount of supersymmetry of the original gauge theory. This was the condition. Okay, provided we also modified the supersymmetry transformations on the fermion field in a suitable way. By adding terms which are order G, okay, and depend on these tensors, which we call the fermion shift tensors. Depending on phi and on the gauge. And H invariant. Namely invariant under the isotropic group of the scalar manifold, which is the maximal compact subgroup of our global symmetry group. Okay. Now, what is the general form of H in an extended supergravity? H as this form is the product of a factor which I would call H automorphism times H matter. Okay? H automorphism is the automorphism group of the superalgebra, on which the whole supergravity is based, which is super Poincaré. So this is the so-called R symmetry that Sam has mentioned yesterday. So H out is equal to UN for n less than 8, SUN for n equal 8. Okay? And it acts on the, as we said at the beginning, it acts on the indices A, B, C. Okay? Labeling the supersymmetry generators. H matter is a factor, is a part of the isotropy group which acts on the matter fields. The vector multiplets, for instance, okay? Or hypermultiplets, in case of n equals 2. Okay, so this is the structure that came out. And as we emphasized, fermion fields don't fill G, don't transform directly under G, but they transform under the compensating transformation in H. So if we perform a transformation in G on the whole theory, bosonic fields do transform directly under G, under this transformation, while fermion fields transform only under the corresponding compensating transformation in H. The fermion fields always fill the symmetry of the point. And just the symmetry of the point. Okay, what we want to do today, so we also wrote a number of consistency conditions that our gauge group should satisfy in order to be a viable gauge group. Okay? We wrote omega mu the gauge connection as GA mu lambda hat x lambda hat, where these are gauge generators, right? The gauge group is x psi lambda hat x lambda hat. Okay. So we found a number of constraints which can be grouped in a first class of constraints which are linear in the gauge generators. Okay? These are related to the invariance of the Lagrangian, the gauge invariance. If they are not satisfied, the Lagrangian is not gauge invariance. This is, if you remember, this is related to the fact that the gauge group has to be a subgroup of G. So it has to have a linear action on the electric field. Okay, then we have the quadratic constraints, which are basically the requirement that the gauge algebra closes, inside the global symmetry algebra. And this implies Jacobi identities for the structure constants. You see, structure constants should be expressed in terms of this matrix, which defines the global symmetry action of the gauge group on the vector field. This means that amounts to saying that the vector fields should perform the co-adjoint representation of the chosen group. Okay? Okay, so let us now move on and address the following problem. First, lifting the blackboard. Yes. Okay. Can we reformulate these constraints? That is, the constraints on consistent gaugings in a form which does not depend on our initial choice of electric frame. Okay? This is the point, this is the problem now we want to address. Here you see, all these constraints, they are written in the electric frame. That is in the frame we started from. Now, can we reformulate these constraints on variable gaugings, in such a way that no reference is made to a reference frame, symplectic frame, okay? This means writing them in a manifestly G covariant. G, I mean covariant with respect to the full global symmetry. Okay? This can be done, and this is what we are going to do now. And it will bring us, it will lead us to the definition of the so-called embedding tensor as a G covariant. Okay, so what we're going to do is the following. So let us define in our symplectic frame, in the electric symplectic frame, a symplectic vector of gauge generators, which consists of our gauge generators, okay, and some magnetic generators, which in our case are zero. But we are just including them in order to be able to write a symplectic vector of generators. Okay? So that we can define a symplectic vector of vector fields consisting of the electric vector fields which are described within our Lagrangian locally, fundamental fields, and some new vectors which are their magnetic duals, which simply do not appear in our field. So that, you see, we can write our gauge connection as G, A mu n, X n. That is G, A mu lambda X lambda plus A mu lambda X lambda. But this is zero, so this is nothing but G, A mu lambda X lambda. So we really haven't done anything. Okay, just added this term, which is zero. But this allows us now to recast all the relations that we wrote in a symplectic covariant form. Okay, In particular, encoding our initial choice of symplectic frame in a symplectic matrix. So let us introduce a symplectic matrix which I denote by E. And let us encode our initial choice of the symplectic frame in this matrix, which relates our initial symplectic frame. Sorry.
Is this equivalent to putting the electrical part in the define the same footing?
It's our initial symplectic frame. Sorry.
Is this equivalent to putting the electrical part in the define the same footing? Is that what you're essentially?
That's what we are going to do. Yes, yes, precisely. So here they are not on the same footing because one appears in the Lagrangian, the other is not. Do not, does not. Okay. But now this is what we want to do. Okay. So let us introduce now a symplectic matrix. The first index in our original symplectic frame. The second index in a generic symplectic. This is in SE 2 and 1, and 1 is the number of vector fields R. Okay? And then write Xm as E M and Xn. So now we define a vector of generators, okay, in a generic symplectic frame. We are changing our symplectic frame by means of a symplectic matrix. Okay? So we are changing what we call electric and what we call magnetic. That's all. So if we write this explicitly, you see that we are expressing our gauge generators as a combination, which are, we call them electric gauge generators. Okay? It's a combination of some new electric gauge generators and magnetics, which are, you see, on an equal footing, written like this. Okay? Clearly, now we have at least twice as many generators formally, okay, as the vector fields of the theory. Okay, so that is a bit of a problem. There is a clear redundancy because these new gauge generators are not independent, since we have the other condition which follows from this one, which is E lambda, lambda, x lambda, plus E lambda. So clearly, this poses a condition, which implies simply that only at most a number n1 of generators is linearly independent. Okay, so it's involved in the gauge. Now this allows us to rewrite the gauge connection in a symplectic invariant way. G A mu M E M N X N. Now let's call this combination. Let's denote them. Well, let's identify them with the vectors electric and magnetic in the new frame. Electric and magnetic in the new frame. And now this is a non-trivial symplectic combination. Now this is a non-trivial symplectic combination in the new basis. Okay, because x lambda, lower lambda, and x upper lambda in general are different from zero. They are not independent. Okay? So we have to remember that this can always be written in this form here, so that at most n1 vector fields are involved in the gauging. Okay? And in our electric gauging, these are precisely those vector fields that appear in the Lagrange, that are described locally in the field, okay, in the Lagrange. Okay, after having done this, that we listed there, linear and quadratic in the array, as we shall see, they're going to have a very simple form in the new frame. So let me so we have defined this new array of generators. Now we want to write the duality action of this new array of generators in the new frame. That is what we call R1 of Xn. The action of these generators on the vector field strengths and their magnetic dual, but in the new frame. Okay? This is a matrix that we have this index structure. Okay? You see now we are considering the action of these generators in the new symplectic frame, labeled by unhatted indices. Well, what's the relation between this and our original generators? The relation goes through the can be written in terms of the matrix E easily. Okay, so X. Let us avoid writing brackets here. Okay, so what I mean by this tensor is just this: the matrix form of the gauge generator. Let me write it as like this. This is nothing but e to the minus 1 m hat, e to the minus 1 n hat, x m hat, p hat, e p hat, p. Okay? So, going to the new frame means rotating, changing all the indices from hatted to unhatted by using the matrix E and its inverse. Okay? So you see now we have defined a tensor, which is manifestly G covariant, because it has symplectic indices. As opposed to the tensors that we used yesterday, with hatted lambda, hatted sigma, hatted gamma, hatted Greek indices, which were not symplectic covariant. Now this is a manifestly symplectic covariant. So now we want to characterize this, okay, as an element of the global symmetry algebra here. Okay, the global symmetry algebra. So this has to be contained in GE. However, now we want to formulate conditions on our gauge generators which do not refer to any particular symplectic frame. So do not refer to any particular Lagrange and do not refer to any particular global symmetry group of the Lagrange. Okay? So we want to characterize these as being not, as belonging not to the algebra of a so global symmetric group of some Lagrangian, no? But as belonging to the algebra, let's call it like this algebra of the global symmetric group G. Let's call this algebra, well, we have already called this algebra. Okay? So this is what we should do now. No more reference to Lagrangians and their global symmetry. So we want to characterize now this X set as elements of the algebra. Some notation for describing the algebra G. Let us denote by T alpha, alpha running from 1 to the dimension of G, the generators of G. Which define a basis of its algebra, and which satisfy the commutation relations with F, alpha, beta, gamma. They are the structure constants of, okay, satisfying the Jacobi identity. Now, each of these generators will have a symplectic representation through R1. So R1 of T alpha describes the duality action, electric magnetic duality action of the generator T alpha as an infinitesimal generator of global symmetry. So this is a matrix which has the structure T alpha and N. Because it acts on the vector of electric field strengths and their magnetic fields. Delta alpha of our vector of electric field strengths and magnetic dual, this is nothing but minus T alpha N M F N union. Okay, this is how they act, you see, on the electric field strengths and their magnetic. Okay, so R1 simply associates with each generator a matrix, which is a 2 and 1 times 2 and 1 symplectic matrix, symplectic generator. However, this correspondence R1 is not injected in there. Okay, so this means that it can have a kernel, a non-trivial kernel. There can be generators, isometric generators in G, which have a trivial duality action on the vector field strengths and their magnetic fields. This is the case of n equal to 2 theories, and in particular of the isometries of the quaternionic element. Okay, but let's get to that later. So this is the general notation. We're not assuming that the kernel that this is injected. Okay, so some of these matrices may be trivial, maybe zero. Okay, so these matrices have to be symplectic. So this means that R1 T alpha transpose C plus C R1 T alpha has to be zero. This is the symplectic condition on the generators. But this amounts to saying that T alpha N C N P is equal to T alpha M P N P N C N M. Check. Check. This is the same as C. Okay, where I recall that C is the symplectic invariant matrix. Okay, so let us now use the following notation for raising and lowering symplectic indices. We use the invariant matrix C for raising and lowering symplectic indices. And we say that Dm is equal to C Mn, and Dm is equal to D N C and N. This is the notation that we use. The convention we use for raising and lowering symplectic indices. Okay, this is called the northwest southeast convention. Southeast. Okay, northwest southeast convention. So this means that we can lower the second index of the generator T alpha as a symplectic generator, okay, and define T alpha Mn to be T alpha MP times CPN. This is the definition. So we are lowering the second index. The symplectic condition amounts to saying that T alpha Mn is symmetric in in the two symplectic indices. Once we lower it, okay. Okay, this is what I wanted to say about the convention, about the description of the global symmetry group. Now we want to require that Xn belongs to the algebra of G. This means that Xm can be expanded in the basis T alpha, or any basis, of course, of our gauge algebra. Okay? Because it's an element of this algebra, it's a vector space. This means that it can be expanded in any basis we choose for this vector space. Okay? And let us denote the coefficient of this expansion by theta. So we see that the requirement that the gauge generators in this generic symplectic basis be contained in the global symmetry group generator of the theory, of the gauge theory, leads us to introduce this tensor here, this quantity, theta. This is called the embedding tensor. The embedding tensor, as you can see, encodes all information about the choice of the gauge algebra inside the global symmetry algebra. Everything is here. So all information about the gauging is here. Okay? And you see that for the way in which we have introduced it, defined it, formally, it is a G covariant tensor. Theta M alpha is a G covariant tensor. So although it is a non-dynamical tensor, it's made of coupling constant, it's made of structure constant. Formally, I know how to act on it by means of G, because it belongs to R1 index n times M joint of G. Okay? So we are encoding all information about our choice of the gauge group in a tensor, which is formally, at least, a covariant with respect to G. Is this clear? Are there any questions? This is called the embedding tensor. As we shall see now, the various conditions can be consistency conditions of the gauging that we formulated in a specific frame can be recast in this generic frame using theta. Okay? So let us define XMNP as XMN RCRE by lowering the last index. Okay. Now you can see, you can easily verify that the linear constraints that we wrote at the beginning, that is x lambda gamma sigma equals 0. X lambda sigma gamma equals 0. And x lambda sigma gamma equals 0. These constraints, they can be recast in the simple form. In this generic symplectic frame. Okay? You can verify by simply specializing. This is written in the generic frame, but if you specialize this to the electric frame, what you get are precisely these conditions. Okay? So they are all encoded in one. Remember that in the electric frame, this is different from 0, but this is equal to 0. Okay? Okay, then we have the quadratic constraints. We change our frame by simply expressing to the matrix E the Hutton index in terms of unhutted pieces, and the quadratic constraints related to the closure. Now it can be written, closure of the gate algebra inside the algebra of G, now can be written in this manifesting provider. Now you see, we have it's twice as many gauge generators, okay, as those we can use. Okay, so there is a clear redundancy. There is a clear redundancy, and this is the price we have to pay in order to write these constraints in a manifested G covariant way. However, this is not enough, because remember, we have defined these generators XM through a symplectic rotation from an electric frame. Now we want also to encode this condition in a condition on theta. Now we want to write a condition on theta that guarantees that whatever theta I take, there exists a matrix E, which allows us to rotate to a symplectic frame, so to an electric frame. Okay? So this is called the locality condition. And it can be recast in this way, in this form. In this symplectic invariant form. This is telling us that theta, seen as a collection of symplectic vectors labeled by alpha, theta n1, theta n2, okay, they are all mutually local. This implies this two-way implication, the existence of an E-M-N matrix such that X M equal to E-M and Xn as only electric component and no magnetic component. Okay? So what this condition is telling us is that there always exists a symplectic matrix E such that xm hat obtained from xm through the action of E is electric. So there always exists a matrix, a symplectic matrix, which rotates to a symplectic frame. So sorry, to an electric frame. To an electric frame. However, this electric frame, that is this matrix E, depends on theta, clearly. Okay? So if I choose for any embedding tensor solution to these constraints, there's going to be a corresponding electric frame. We're going to name it the electric frame of the embedding tensor. Choosing a different solution, that is a different embedding tensor, we typically end up into a different electric frame. Okay? So the matrix E depends on this. The matrix E is easily constructed, starting with this condition here. And we shall show how to do that. Okay? It's not easy. You can easily construct the matrix E explicitly, which leads you to the electric frame. Are there questions? So now you see we have one linear constraint, which is this one, and we have two quadratic constraints, 1 and 2 locality constraints. We can rewrite the quadratic constraint in an equivalent way in terms of theta. We can write it in this equivalent form in terms of theta. You can easily check that these two are equivalent. Okay? Now we can, using this form of the quadratic of this quadratic constraint, you can easily interpret it. Give an interpretation to this quadratic constraint as the condition that the embedding tensor as a G tensor is invariant under the action of the gauge group it defines. So this is a way of interpreting this condition here. Theta is invariant under G. That is the gauge group it defines. Is invariant under G. How to show this? Well, we have to write down the explicit variation of theta with respect to a gauge transformations generated by theta. Okay? So gauge transformation defined by theta. Let us consider an infinitesimal. G transformation. Generated by psi m theta m alpha, so let's call it xm. Okay? Generated by this. And let us compute the variation under this of theta. This infinitesimal transformation in gauge group, see, under theta. I know how to act by means of this on theta because theta is a G covariant object, so it's covariant with respect to any subgroup, including the gauge group. Okay? So this is, I have to act on these two indices. I first act on the first index, and what I get is minus psi p, index alpha, okay? Xp. Beta alpha times theta and beta. See, I'm transforming the first index, which is a contravariant index, in the adjoint representation. Okay, now let's transform the first index. Okay? But now what is this? Xp beta gamma is nothing but theta p sigma t sigma, definition of x, but in the adjoint representation. But t sigma in the adjoint representation is nothing but minus the structure constants. Tp sigma f sigma beta gamma. Okay? Because the adjoint representation of any generator is just minus the structure constants, beta and gamma. Okay? Okay, so what we end up with is the psi theta and alpha is equal to psi p times theta p sigma theta m beta f sigma beta gamma plus xp n beta beta n gamma. Sorry, there is an alpha here. Sorry, there is an alpha. Okay, alpha. The upper index here is alpha. I just call it gamma, but alpha, alpha. Okay. But this is nothing but the quadratic. So one, yeah, but they said one generator would be xp, sorry, xp. Okay. Another interpretation is that the electric magnetic vector fields should transform under the gauge group in its conjoint representation. This is the original interpretation we gave of this same. Okay. How about, so we interpreted the locality constraint in terms of the existence for each theta of its own electric frame. This quadratic constraints, we gave an interpretation now. How about the linear constraints? What is the interpretation of the linear constraints? Here, well, the interpretation is not straightforward. The interpretation is not straightforward, okay? But as you can see, this is a G covariant linear constraint. This means that this is on our theta G covariant object. So this means that this is a constraint of linear representation. And it's telling us the linear representation of G in which theta transforms. This is telling us that theta and alpha should transform in a specific representation of theta. Okay? So we said that theta transforms in the representation R1 times adjoint of G. Okay? Now this product here of representations is in general not irreducible. It will decompose with respect to G. And this will contain a representation of theta plus other representations. What this linear constraint is telling us is that theta should be in a particular representation within this decomposition. Not really, but in a particular one. Now, this linear constraint is also referred to as a supersymmetry constraint. Well, this is related to the fact that if this constraint were not satisfied, okay, then the cancellations to order G of the supersymmetry variation of our gauged action, which involved these Fermi shift tensors N, S, M, okay, would work. If this condition were not satisfied, our whole construction of the gauged Lagrangian, which involved these modifications, these new terms involving these tensors N, S, M, okay, that simply wouldn't work. Wouldn't work for a theoretical reason, which now I'm going to show. Another way of seeing this, maybe the most straightforward way of interpreting this linear constraint, is in terms of gauging variance. Simply, this constraint does not hold, didn't hold, the Lagrangian would not be gauging variant. You can see this because one of these constraints was the one found by David Flowers and Van Bruyen in the electric ring. Do you remember? X, lambda, sigma, gamma, totally symmetric part equals 0. And this was the constraint that they derived in order for the Lagrangian to be gauging variant. So not from supersymmetry, but from gauging variance of the action. And indeed, if you compute the variation of the bosonic action and the genetic gauge transformation, you see that it's going to be proportional to this symmetric part, totally symmetric part. So it vanishes provided this totally symmetric part is zero. So we have these two different interpretations: supersymmetry variance, gauging variance. But the two are not independent. We know because supersymmetry closes, as Sam was mentioning yesterday, closes on the local symmetries of the theory, which include gauge symmetries. So if the theory were not gauge invariant, it would also not be supersymmetry invariant. Okay? So these are related to one another. Okay? Okay. So let's briefly mention how. Okay. Yes. Let us briefly mention how this Elling tensor enters the supersymmetry variation of the action. Okay. It enters through another tensor, which is called the T tensor. We are now going to define. We consider now a theory which is described in which the scalar sector is described by a homogeneous, possibly symmetric scalar mechanism. So M scalar equal to H. Although what I'm saying can also be extended to a non-homogeneous case, which occurs for any position, can occur only for any. Now we're seeing that each point P in this manifold is in one-to-one correspondence with a coset, a left coset, okay? And picking a representative of the coset means choosing a parametrization. So we choose a coset representative that is a parametrization, which is in one-to-one correspondence with our point. Well, modulo the action, the right action of the group H, the isotropic group H. Okay? P of 5. So phi are the coordinates labeling the point, the genetic. Okay. Now LP, our cosine represent R. We have seen also that for any G in G, G times L of phi is equal to the cosine representative in the transformed point phi prime times the compensating transformation, which depends on G and phi. So local in this case in the manifold, okay, local in the on the scalar length, and the Fermion fields transform under this. Okay. So we can consider the representation R1 of L of phi because L of phi is an element of G. So we can represent it in its action on the electric field strengths and their magnetic duals through the representation R1. Okay, what we end up with is a matrix. Okay, so we can define this matrix here. The first index is acted on by G. The second index is acted on by H. Okay. Okay. So you see that the embedding the cosine representative naturally, since it is actually done by G from the left and by H from the right, naturally intertwines between bosonic fields and fermionic fields. Since the fermions transform under H, and the bosons and their derivatives transform under G. Okay. The second index of L can contract with fermionic bilinears, for instance, and the first one can contract with bosons. Okay. So the cosine representative is the object which intertwines between the two things: fermions which only transform under H, and bosons which only transform under G, and allows us to construct couplings which are G invariant. They are constructed like this, G invariant couplings. Okay? Are there any questions? So we can identify this object, which is consists of the bosonic fields, their derivatives, dressed with embedding tensor, as an object which I call F of bosons and T bosons, because its free index now is the second index of the embedding tensor, which transforms under H. This is called composite. Example of composite fields are the center charge. Center charges are electric and magnetic charges, okay, which naturally transform under G, dressed by the embedding the cosine representative, and they transform under H, the compensating transformation. Okay. The T tensor that we are now going to define. The T tensor that we are now going to define is an object of this kind. Is defined by dressing the embedding tensor, which formally contracting this object with fermion bilinears, which do transform by H. We can construct invariant, G invariant. Okay. do we define the T tensor? This is T and function of scalar fields and theta. And this is obtained by dressing the embedding tensor by means of a cosine representative. So this is obtained by acting by means of L of phi on our embedding tensor theta. How? Well, the embedding tensor has two indices, so I have to act by means of phi, a value of phi, on the two indices. Sorry, L minus 1. This is L minus 1, M theta, M alpha, okay? And this is the action of L on the first index. Then you have to act on the second index, because it has to be a simultaneous action on the two indices. On the second index, you see that it acts like this. Theta, okay? And this is T and beta, okay? So we have defined a tensor which has the same index structure as theta, an M and a beta, but which transforms under the compensating transformation, because it is obtained from theta by dressing theta by means of the embedding of the cosine representative. Okay? Let's prove that it transforms like this. So let us write T theta phi theta schematically as L minus 1 times theta. This is a symbolic way of writing this. L minus 1 in the representation of theta acting on theta. To be precise, we should write R of theta of L minus 1 times theta. Okay? To be precise. But let's be slow and write just like that. Just as L minus 1. Let us show that under a generic transformation in G, this T transforms as a composite field, so through the compensating transformation. And so it can be used to couple, to construct terms defining couplings between scalar fields of bosons and fermions. Take G. G L phi is equal to L phi prime times H, which depends on phi and G. Okay. Okay. Where phi goes into G into phi prime, which is a nonlinear function of phi. Okay. And the theta transforms in G times theta, where I should write R theta or G of theta. Okay? But then it's not okay, I just write it like this, in a symbolic way. This means action of G on theta. I know how to act by means of G on theta. Okay? So how does T transform? T of phi prime theta prime, this is equal to L minus 1 phi prime times theta prime. Now I read L minus 1 phi prime from here in terms of L of phi. And what this is H L minus 1 of phi times G minus 1, okay, times theta prime, which is G of phi, G of theta, okay. Now you see that these two cancel out. And we are left with H times L minus 1 phi times theta. That is H times T. of phi. So this is an example of the composite I was talking about. This is a clear example. If I transform both phi and theta, if I transform both phi and theta, it transforms by the compensating transformation. So if I transform both phi and theta at the same time, it transforms as an H tensor. H tensor. It transforms as an H tensor. And so I can use it I can contract it with the fermion bilinear to construct H invariant modules. Okay, and therefore this is needed to construct the terms in the Lagrangian depending on the invariant tensor, which are manifest invariant under H transformations. Okay. Okay. Are there any questions? Yes.
So asymmetry is an example of composite field.
R-symmetry. R-symmetry is part of H. Okay, so R-symmetry is a group. A composite field is made of bosons and derivative of bosons. Okay, dressed with the coset represented, so that it transforms under H, and in particular under, as you say, the R-symmetry group. But the R-symmetry group is not by itself a composite field. I give another example of composite field, which are addressed field strengths. These are also important in supergravity. So we have our F M nu, which depend only on the vector fields. Okay, these are our electromagnetic vector of electromagnetic field strengths. Okay, it transforms under G. We know in the representation R1. Okay, but I can construct now. How to denote them? Well, let's denote them by T, but not confuse it with the T tensor. Okay, so T with the double line here. Okay, let's define this function of phi and the vector fields, okay, and their derivatives, to be L M underscore, okay, times F M. Okay, this depends on phi, and this is our vector. So I'm dressing the vector of electric field strengths and their magnetic fields by means of L. I write this index with the underlined. Why? Because to emphasize that this index is acted on H. It is the right index of the coset group. Okay. Now this can be written as formally L minus 1 of phi acting on F. And why? Well, because you see, this matrix defines the action on covariant objects. Okay, so F would transform with an N minus 1. This is the usual thing. So you can easily verify that under any GG, this T of phi prime A prime, this is equal to L minus 1 phi prime times F prime. We will play the same trick here. Okay. This is H times L of 5 times G minus 1 times G. And these two cancel. So this is H times T of 5A. So you see, if we transform both phi and A, what we end up with is a transformation in H of the same tensor. Okay? So it happens precisely the same way. This tensor is particularly important in ungauged theories. There's no embedding tensor here because it defines the central charges. The central charges in a black hole solution, they are composite objects depending on the electric and magnetic charges and on phi. And these are defined as the integral of an S2 at infinity of this object T. N. Okay? And they characterize the physical properties of for instance, black hole solution at radial infinity. Okay. Now, why did we, how much time do we have left for?
Been like 10 minutes over.
I'm 10 minutes over now. Okay, okay. So I think we can make a break
Okay.
and then we go on. Okay.
Does anybody have any questions? Also? Okay, we can just take a coffee break. The coffee should be next door. So, and then we'll see. Next door. So, and then we'll see. We have to go over, but I think they'll be back. Can go to his school.
Oh, it's end of term
Yeah.
reports and that. Then what happens? Yeah, okay. This was not was a extension that is giving problems, so you cannot make a statement for all the time functions. Now we're saying we have a program. We have to work them in a particular manner so that we can type. And it's 165, so it's crazy. I find that everything will be oriented. Everything will be. No, this is.
if it's streaming, it's just going on.
Yeah. I don't think it's up to you. It's just for lunch.
It's one session or just.
Okay. If you do students together, because I'm looking to pick up a Catholic in now. Then so, oh, okay.
take it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on.
Well, so they can, yeah, that's when you start out with the-
Yeah, perfect.
So you want to,
Yeah.
and, what,
No, he is like, he was in Joburg for a few years, and he just shifted back to Cape Town, so he's just picking up some of his things and making some things.
you say that.
That's what he was.
Well, no one else needs to.
Also, he's a manager.
Yes. That is true. Yeah, so moving on.
Yeah, just like 1 week and 1 month.
Yeah. Well, enjoy your trip back.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you.
That's what you-
Drink coffee. Should I? Oh, let's see. It feels like I'm going on without an iPad here. Everybody has iPads. It's only me and, maybe my other iPad. Should left out.
No, it's not that I created.
What is it that I need?
No, it's, the thing is, I'm very poor in finding.
You're not both, brother. You're not both.
So how do you?
I have, for the important stuff, yeah, I have notebooks, like, those, old school notebooks. That's the only way I can keep stuff.
Let me tell you how painful.
Yeah.
I have one, even those, I don't know, you know,
This is,
that's.
yeah, I know that's not good.
What do you? No, it's not recorded. No, it's not recorded.
Oh,
Yeah.
they also put up.
I'll make them run. Someone is doing it, and someone is doing it. No, well, that computer is. Yeah, that's too fast. I'm choking out for you, you're the cool business.
Yeah, because actually I wanted to try and have like a live stream and have like a live stream. Because actually I wanted to try and have like a live stream and have like a live stream. So yeah, but I was stuck.
No, it's totally doable.
Yeah.
You might need an operator who would know which channel to switch to. Because if you want to have two cameras, there's going to be a camera over in the room, right? And then you use the slides. So you need somebody to switch between the channels. So, and you need incredibly quick internet. You need incredibly good internet.
I wanted to be one and do one of that problem. Probably have to be hard.
Yeah, no, you can do that so that, you have to order the concept. You have to plan for the kid. This I will order for each case, they will switch channel, and then, but you cannot on the fly, say, let me just use the phone, then somebody has to pan over the it's pretty involved.
Unless one uses one of those.
Oh, those scribbles.
Yeah. And yeah,
Yeah. So you can have something that catches the hand. But that's for you. Because it's never saying stuff, it's definitely you writing stuff. But who's, the guys who are live, just see you writing stuff, they don't see what you write. So what I mean? So you gotta change it. So what I mean? So you gotta change it.
oh, but then they can get it from the. Hey, you go to your front.
So we gonna be.
Yeah, but since, yeah. Yeah, probably at this, I was still in my.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's no tech ideas.
Yeah. Now let me quickly go with the.
Were you able to electrocute?
Yeah.
It was a smooth process. Or should I say smooth? The ladies ignored me for like 2 minutes. I took the white lady, decided to help me out, and then they decided to join in.
Okay.
Yeah, but other than that, yeah. I do indeed.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
So it's something that's very.
No, man. I was complaining to them, man. 3 years of my life,
Yeah.
introduced to this one piece of paper.
Exactly, Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. One of the nice things about having a nice day is you won't go to the board and try to speak.
Oh,
And you did it with my lectures. I'm writing a small note, like like we want to make it a tiny opinions.
yeah.
But in a small space, so I'm writing and then more. You write something and you try to make it be.
I see.
So you will say.
No, man, I need to move on. I want to join the masses, adopt the technology. Doesn't have nothing. Oh, but he,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, he also, he even teaches sometimes difficulty, I think, with,
okay, so it's just me and you.
So,
Are you some work? Are you some work now?
I need to respond to a few emails.
Oh,
The past 2 or 3 days when I got home, just went straight to bed.
yeah.
The drive is tiring.
Yeah, also, after the lessons you drive.
Yeah. And admin is shutting down at work, so I need to sort out whatever
Oh, yeah.
needs to be paid out this week.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm not getting money.
Mhm. I'm good at mediation. I'm great.
Oh, should I put this on? Yeah, it's already on.
It's already.
Okay, okay.
Andiamo molto Egitto. No. Sure. Andiamo molto Egitto. No. Sure.
Okay, so. So let's explain why we have introduced this new object, is a t-tensor. The reason is that you remember yesterday, we started from a gauge invariant Lagrange, which was not supersymmetric. LG. And the variation, we can verify the variation of this Lagrange with respect to the supersymmetry, no, was proportional to some f, or call it Tm, call it f, m, times t, phi of theta, times a fermion bilinear. Okay, this is very schematic, very schematic. Okay, so the variation, supersymmetry variation of this Lagrangian, okay, was not zero due to the minimal couplings which broke explicitly supersymmetry. Okay, and what you found that was that the variation. What you can find is that the variation depends on the embedding tensor through the T tensor. Okay, so what you do is you add these extra terms, no, delta LG1 plus delta LG2, plus additional terms, the supersymmetry transformation of the fermion fields, depending on these the H tensors, which are S, N, and M. Okay, and so you end up with a Lagrangian, a gauge Lagrangian, which has to be gauge supersymmetry invariant under supersymmetry. Now you can verify that the variation of this is the form of, say, this Fm, then you have Tm, the T tensor, but then you have, let me write it in a very, very schematic way, S terms N and M as well. Fermions. This is fermion. I'm writing it in a very schematic way. Okay. These are the new terms, order G, order G, order G. These are the new terms which arise from our modifications, like this additional term to the Lagrangian and the additional term to the supersymmetry transformation law. Now this has to be zero. This means that the new tensors, which are H tensors that you introduce in these additional terms and in the supersymmetry transformation laws of the fermion fields, must cancel T, the T tensor. But this can occur only if T contains inside only the H representations corresponding to S, N, and M, and nothing else. So this is a constraint. How do we realize this? Well, how do we check this? We know that the T tensor transforms under H if we transform theta and phi simultaneously. However, if we just transform theta and not phi, well, then this transforms under G. Why? Because it transforms like where is the definition? L minus 1 phi G L phi times T of phi. So you see that if we transform only theta, but we keep phi fixed, so we keep ourselves on the same point in the manifold, you can verify from the very definition of T, which is there, I guess, okay, that T transform under this, which is a transformation in G, depending on phi, it's a transformation in G. So formally, T belongs to R of theta, because it's not what we have done for defining T is dressing theta, which transforms, because it's not what we have done for defining T is dressing as a G object by means of the closet representative, which is a G transformation. So formally, T is also in the same representation as the embedding and satisfies the same constraint as the embedding tensor, because it is obtained by dressing the embedding tensor by means of a G transformation. And all the constraints on the embedding tensor are G-covariant. So this is clear. But as an H object, this representation decomposes with respect to H, because H is a smaller group. And in general, we contain the representation of S plus the representation of the tensor N plus the representation of the tensor M plus other things. Now, in order for this cancellation to occur, it cannot contain any other thing. And this amounts to constraint on the T tensor and also these S and N representations. So SUSY invariance implies that this cannot occur. Of course, here I include also the conjugate representations, okay? And you can verify that this is corresponds precisely to the on the embedding tensor to this condition. This is why this condition here, the linear constraint, which is a representation constraint, is also related to the supersymmetry invariance of the theory. It tells us that T, the T tensor, which is encodes all well, in terms of which all variations of the original Lagrangian, the Lagrangian are written, cannot contain terms which cannot be cancelled by the Fermion shift tensors. Okay. Okay. So good. So we have recast the condition, the consistency condition for the gauge group, the choice of the gauge group in terms of G covariant conditions. So the idea is that provided we find a solution to these constraints, okay, there are infinitely many solutions to these constraints. Once we find a solution to this constraint, theta and alpha solution to linear and quadratic constraints, we know from the locality constraint that there exists an electric field in which theta lambda alpha is equal to 0. Then we rotate to this frame and we proceed as we described yesterday. Okay, we perform the gauging in the electric frame. Okay. Now we want to go one step further. Any questions? We want to go one step further. We want to free ourselves from this last step. That is, we want to perform a gauging, construct a gauge supergravity in frame which is not the electric frame of the embedding tensor. This is now the main objective. Okay. Then later I will give you also some examples in some brief supergravity of these representations. Okay. But let me discuss this point, which I think is a good last topic for these lectures. So we want now to define a duality covariant gauging. That is gauging in a generic symplectic frame which is not in general the electric frame of theta and alpha. Okay? As we shall see, something interesting will come out from this. Okay? Trying to construct this theory. So, where do we start from? In order to construct this theory, we start from the gauge connection. Okay? So we start defining a gauge connection, which is equal to theta a m mu, theta x in xn. that is G, A lambda mu x lambda plus A lambda mu x lambda. Okay? We write the connection as we wrote before. Okay? Now, for the sake of simplicity, since G always multiplies the gauge generators, okay? Now we already discussed the supersymmetry variation of the action and how to construct the supersymmetric action, which has to be done iteratively in the powers of G. Now we don't need G anymore. So we can reabsorb G in the definition of X. Okay? The embedding tensor contains everything, all parameters, including G. Okay, so G was just a convenient introduced for convenience. So we just reabsorb it in X. So what is the difference with respect to the last our previous clip? Okay. We know that we can always write this thanks to the locality condition in this form, where this is the electric frame of the embedding tensor. We can always write this in this form. What we have to do so far is to construct the gauging in a gauged supergravity in which these were the electric field strengths. So the electric vector fields to be described within the Lagrange, that is within the kinetic terms and all that. Okay? This is what we learned so far. Now what we want to do is, although we can always write this in this way, is to construct a gauge Lagrange in which the electric vector fields are these ones. That is, in which these are the vector fields, elementary vector fields described locally in the Lagrange. Okay? So you see that the minimal coupling involves not only the electric vector fields of the symplectic frame we're working in, okay, which are described locally in the Lagrange, but also their magnetic tools. Okay? So this is the difference. We don't go to the electric frame, we do the gauging here. And these are going to be our elementary fields. So we start from omega and we construct the field strengths. Following the same steps. Yes, okay. How do we construct the field strengths? F equal P omega minus omega with omega. There's no more constant. So you do this. And then you write this as Fm xm. You do this exercise using this. What you end up with is Fm, an expression for the field strength, which is PAM plus XNP n divided by 2 AN wedge AP. Okay? So you see, everything is covariantized. The indices, which were running from 1 to the number of vector fields, now are replaced by symplectic indices. And you see that these two lower indices are automatically anti-symmetrized because they are contracted by this wedge product. Okay? Okay. So, what's wrong with this? Well, you can verify that the Bianchi identity are not satisfied. Are different from zero. Moreover, there's another problem with this. Fm do not transform under a gauge transformation in a covariant. Covariant. Under G, the Jacobi identities for these new structure constants, M and P are not satisfied. So we come across this new situation, this new problem. As we shall see in a moment, we can solve these problems by coupling, combining these non-abelian field strengths with two forms. So covariance, that is covariance of our object, is required by invariance of our theory, the theory we want to construct, requires combining one form's vector fields through their field strength to two forms. Let us see how and why this comes about. Let me do this calculation explicitly because this is a key point. So we start from the quadratic constraints written in this form here. M, P, R, X, N, R, S minus X, M, P, R, X, M, R, S, plus X, M, N, R, X, R, P, S equals 0. You can verify that the quadratic constraint written in terms of the representation of the gauge generators, the duality R1 representation of the gauge generators can just be written this way. Okay? So the first thing we notice is that if we symmetrize in M and N, this is antisymmetric in M and N. As you can easily see. So the symmetric part of this has to be 0. So this follows from the quadratic constraint. In general, we can have, and we have, a symmetric part of this tensor in the lower indices. But once we contract with another generator, this is 0. Okay, this is an important message. Then let us now anti-symmetrize in 3 indices. Okay, M, P, and N. This guy here. So if we anti-symmetrize, this is in M, P, and N. By this symbol, I mean we anti-symmetrize these 3 indices. M, P, and N. These two, they simply sum up. And then I get this one. We get another thing. We get another condition, which is this one. Twice X and P are X and R S anti-symmetrizing MP and N is equal to minus X M N R X R P S. Okay. Here is M N. So we get this condition here. Okay. Okay, now what we do is we write this guy here as, so let me just change here the position N and B. So I get the plus here, okay? Okay, let us write this as, and this one, as the sum of the symmetric part and anti-symmetric part. We do also like the same here. Summing this, writing this tensor as the sum of the tensor in which these two indices are anti-symmetrized, plus the same tensor in which these two indices are symmetrized. So PR S, I write it as X PR S plus X PR S. Okay, this is what we do. Let's do it here and here as well. Okay, and then let's put to the left everything, all the terms which contain the one with the anti-symmetrized lower indices, and to the right the terms containing the symmetrized one. Okay, so what we end up with is the following: X mn r X P R S is equal to minus 1/3 X mn, where these are anti-symmetrized, okay? M N R X P R S. So this is anti-symmetrized mn on both sides, okay? But now you can see that this is the right-hand side can be written as the Jacobinator. That is the combination of the structure constant, which should be 0 if Jacobi identity were the whole, but which is not 0. So we write this in this form here. X MP R X NR S minus X NP R X MR S, okay, plus X MN R X RP S. This is equal to, this is not 0, but is equal to X mn R X PR S, anti-symmetrized mn. So these are the structure constants. Now, symplectically covariant structure constants, okay? And you see that they do not satisfy the Jacobi, because the right-hand side would be 0, the Jacobi identity. They do not satisfy. The obstruction to the Jacobi identity is proportional to this tensor here, which is nothing but the symmetrized one, the X tensor with the symmetrized lower indices. The same tensor that we have shown before to be 0 if contracted with a gauge. The same. So you see that if we contract S with a gauge generator, SS, so the free index S, we contract with an X, and we contract this as an XS, well, this would be 0 because of this. Okay? So now you see that this condition here is telling us something. It's telling us that there are some of the parameters, of the two NV parameters in this redundant formulation, there are some of these two parameters which are ineffective as gauge transformation, namely do never occur as gauge parameters. If contracted with the gauge generators, they simply give 0. So there is a part of this parameter space of gauge parameters, okay, so this vector space of gauge parameters, which will never occur in a gauge transformation because they just disappear when we contract them with a gauge generators. Okay? And this is a typical thing. I mean, this is characteristic thing of this new formulation. Namely, the Jacobi identity does not hold, but up to a tensor which vanishes when contracted with the gauge generator. That is, the denominator has values in this subspace of the gauge parameter space describing trivial transformations. Yes. Okay. Now we can also verify that these field strengths do not transform covariantly, and that they don't satisfy the Bianchi identity. Now I give you as an exercise, but this is a good exercise using the identities that we just derived. Okay, we can verify that the Fn, which is defined as the AN, DFN plus AN XN P M FP. There's a wedge here. If you write this down explicitly, you see that this is not zero, but this is X M R M A N D A R plus 1/3 X P Q R A P wedge A Q. So the Bianchi identity is not satisfied. Well, this comes with no surprise somehow, because our embedding tensor has magnetic components. In our framework, in our symplectic frame, the magnetic components of the embedding tensor, which are like magnetic charges, are different from zero. So we would expect the Bianchi identities not to be satisfied. However, you see, the Bianchi identities, well, the abstraction of the Bianchi identities is proportional to the same tensor, which is the tensor X with symmetrized lower indices. Okay? So only some of these Fn do not satisfy the Bianchi identities. And those are those whose value is precisely in this subspace of the parameter space, of the gauge parameter space, defining unaffected gauge transformations. Indeed, if we consider if we consider the Bianchi identities only for those vector fields which are involved in the minimal couplings, well, then we find that the Bianchi identities are satisfied. So everything is consistent because those vector fields which are involved in the minimal couplings, they are well defined, and this is the necessary condition for the theory to be physically viable. How do we see that? Well, these are the vector fields which are involved in minimal couplings, those which are contracted by the gauge generators. Now we can take the corresponding field strengths and see if they satisfy the Bianchi identity. And you see that this is proportional to its X on NR M X times this times XM. Now you see that this contraction is zero. This follows from the quadratic constraints. So it's true that for all these redundant sets of vector fields, Bianchi identities are not satisfied. But for those vector fields which enter the gauge connection, so which enter the minimal couplings, the Bianchi identities are satisfied. And this is important because these have to be well defined. These are the vector fields entering with no derivative inside the diagram. So these vector fields have to be well defined, and we see that their Bianchi identities are satisfied. Okay. Variation of gauge variation of the field strength. Now we see that we're going to have a non-covariant gauge variation, because if we vary Fn, As you do this exercise, what you find is the covariant derivative of delta m minus x n m a n delta a b. This is an exercise you can see. Okay? This is the variation with respect to generic variation of A. Now let's make a gauge variation. Under gauge variation, the variation of A, okay, A, the vector field transform, with the, let's call them like this, covariant derivative of the gauge generators. Okay? So if we plug this here, what we find is that delta Fm is equal to d squared epsilon n psi n minus x n b m a n delta b. Here I didn't substitute the value, but let us compute delta squared by Ricci identity can be written as f n x n p m psi p minus plus n p m a n. Okay. Now this is not the variation, the current variation of the covariant variation of M. What would be the covariant variation of M? You see, the covariant variation of M, of F, covariant of F, M would be minus psi p x p n n f n. This would be the covariant variation. Now you may say, okay, but swap these two indices with a minus, I get the right variation. Unfortunately, these two indices are not antisymmetric. This is the main point. Are not antisymmetric. So this is not equal to this. So you see, in order to rewrite this in a variant way, so delta Fn, this is equal to minus psi p x p n m Fn. This is the covariant variation, okay? But then I have to add twice the symmetric value, because that's not for free, okay? So I have a term like this, Pn m times twice Fn psi p minus a n delta e. Okay, so you see, this is the covariant variation, the one we would like to have of Fn. Okay, now this is an unwanted additional term, okay, that somehow we should cancel out by defining a suitable covariant field strength. Okay, because we want to write our theory in terms of objects which are covariant, transform covariantly with respect to the gauge transformation. Okay, but you see that the difference between the F variation and the covariant variation is a term which is proportional to the same tensor. X, the tensor X symmetrizing its lower indices. Okay? So, in order to cancel these terms and define some covariant field strengths, okay, we combine in a new field strength, which I call HM, our non-abelian field strengths with two forms. The alpha. Now you have to think of these as antisymmetric tensors, rank 2 anti-symmetric tensors. Okay? So we combine these field strengths, Nabin field strength, with these rank 2 tensors. How many? Well, alpha runs from 1 to the dimension of G. So these are in the adjoint representation because this tensor set is defined this way. 1/2 theta and alpha. Okay? Z is a tensor depending on theta, linear in theta, okay, which also transforms in the same representation of theta. And you see, it intertwines between F and E in this way, in a natural way. Let's see that if we add this tensor, this coupling here, of the field strength to the rank 2 tensors, the resulting field strengths H by. So if we vary Hm, okay, if we compute the variation of Hm, this is the variation. We have computed its X N P and Fn psi P. Okay. Minus NP and AN delta AP. Okay, this is the second term, plus 1/2 beta m alpha delta B alpha. Now let us see that this tensor here can be expressed in terms of this theta. Okay, so these additional terms can all be expressed in terms of a single tensor, characteristic tensor Z times a variation. Okay, let's prove this. To prove this, we use the linear constraints and the quadratic constraints. The linear constraints are X, M, and P equal to 0. This implies that X, M, and P is equal to minus 1/2 X, P, M, N. Notice that this tensor here is symmetric in the last two indices because XP Mn is nothing but theta p alpha, and that in tensor in which we have raised the symplectic index times T alpha Mn. But T alpha Mn, being T alpha symplectic, is symmetric in these indices once we lower both of them. So this is symmetric in these two indices. Okay? What is this? Well, this is equal to minus 1/2 theta p alpha T alpha Mn. And this is equal to, this is what we call Z, minus ZP alpha T alpha Mn. Okay? So we will see that all the terms which do not fit the covariant variation of our H are all proportional to this second tensor Z. What is a general feature of this tensor Z? Well, if we contract this tensor Z in its symplectic index by that, we get 0. Because this is 1/2 theta m alpha theta m beta, and this is 0 because of the locality constraint. So we have defined a Z tensor, this one, which, if contracted by theta, gives 0. Okay, this is important. Okay. So let us now go on to another step. Pn, or call it n, I should call it n psi p. This is equal to hn minus zn alpha p alpha times x and p and psi n. Okay? I just wrote f in terms of h using the definition of h. Notice that z contracted with x, first index x, gives 0. Because the first index of x is nothing but theta. Is the index of theta. See? X second, this x second write it like this. And z contracted with theta is 0. Because of this. So I can simply cancel this. So I can replace in the first term f with h for free, thanks to the quadratic constraint. Okay? Okay. So we can replace here f with h. Then, as we did before, we write this as minus the tensor with the two lower indices inverted, plus twice the symmetric one, just as we did before. And we get minus h psi n psi p x p n n h n minus, now this term here is 1. We're going to write it as z minus z p alpha t alpha n. Okay? So plus z m alpha t alpha n p a n delta a. Okay? Plus. There's also another term coming from here when we symmetrize twice. So, and that is minus zm alpha times psi p alpha pq psi p hq. Okay? So this is the covariant part. These are everything which is all the other terms which are not covariant are all proportional to this tensor z. You see? Plus z m alpha delta p alpha. So this is the key point in our proof of covariance. We have seen that f is not covariant, not change covariantly, transform covariantly. We have additional terms, but these additional terms are all proportional to the same tensor, and they can be disposed of by choosing a variation of p, a suitable variation of p. So our final result is delta Hn is equal to minus AH psi p XP m Hn. This is the covariant variation. Plus Z m alpha times delta p alpha plus T alpha Mn and P An delta P. Okay? Minus T alpha NP psi H N, okay? And that's it. Now we want this to be minus psi B XPF HN. So we want this to be a covariant variation. So you see, we can choose delta B alpha so as to cancel these two terms. So you see that we need a two-form to which we assign a transformation law with respect to the gauge group, gauge transformations, so that all the non-covariant terms are cancelled. Okay, so minus D alpha and D AM delta E plus D alpha and B psi B, psi M or H. Okay, plus possible terms which, when contracted with Z, are zero, because we just need that this guy here is zero. Okay, so we need, in order to define covariant strengths, we need to couple our one force to the tensor field. Okay, and we can do that because the non-covariant terms in the variation of our field strengths were all proportional to this characteristic tensor Z, which, when contracted with theta, is zero. Okay. Are there questions? So this is the first step of what is called the tensor hierarchy. That is the consistent selective coupling of p-forms to higher order forms through the embedding tensor, okay, which is needed for the covariance of the theory with respect to the invariance of the theory with respect to the gauge group. Okay. Then we can compute the Bianchi identity. Yeah, sorry.
The characteristic tensor Z is related or linearly or proportional to the embedding tensor theta, right?
Precisely.
And the contraction is supposed to be zero.
Yes, because of the quadratic constraint. Z m alpha. This is equal to 1/2 C m n theta and alpha. You see, this is linear in theta. Moreover, it's expressed in terms of theta through tensors which are invariant with respect to G. So Z is in the same representation as theta. But if we contract Z alpha with theta, you see there is a C tensor here. So what we end up with is theta alpha m C mn theta and theta. What is this? This is the locality constraint. So this gives zero. This is one of the constraints. Okay. So this is important. This is important. And if we write down the Bianchi identity, okay, you can do this as an exercise. Okay. What you end up with is something with which is proportional to this Z tensor times the field strength of the two forms, which is suitably defined, and I'm going to define it now. H alpha 3 Zm alpha is equal to d Zm alpha d E alpha minus T alpha n r a n d a r plus 1/2 x PQ are AP, AP. Okay, this is the definition of this tensor, H alpha 3, contracted with Z, because this is the only way in which our tensors enter our theory. Okay, only contracted with Z. Okay, now there's an interesting thing here. Vector fields, now the vector field sense are combined with the two forms. H m is equal to Fn plus Z m alpha B alpha. Now we know that massless two forms, okay, two form fields, by consistency, must be associated with the gauge invariance. Okay, delta B alpha, which we write in this form here. This is the gauge invariance associated with the two form. It generalizes the gauge invariance over one form, plus something. So there must be, for a consistent definition of a massless, because these are massless tensor fields, okay, there must be this invariance. This invariance, you see, is this symmetry, this gauge symmetry, is parameterized by a one form. Just as the gauge symmetry for a one form, that is a vector, is parameterized by a function. This is parameterized by a one form. This is a one form. This is a two form. Now, what happens is that H must be invariant with respect to this transformation. So this implies that also the one forms should transform under the gauge symmetry associated with the two forms. And if you compute the variation under this gauge transformation of HM, this has to be 0, but this is equal to the variation of A, which we need to define, HM, plus ZM alpha times delta of B alpha plus T alpha PQ PQ AP delta, which we have to define AP. This has to be 0. Okay? So this is 0 provided we require that delta psi B alpha plus T alpha PQ AP delta psi AQ is equal to D of this new one form parameter, A alpha. And you see, if this varies by a covariant derivative of a one form parameter, okay? So what we're saying is this is the covariant derivative of one form parameter. Okay, you see that this is invariant provided that delta psi AM is equal to minus Zn alpha AP psi alpha. Okay, so we have to assign, in order for this coupling to be consistent, we have to assign a transformation property of the lower order forms with respect to the gauge transformation associated with high rank one, the B's, in order for this to be 0. And you see that if we choose psi alpha appropriately, we can set some of these AM to 0. But not all of these AM feel this transformation. So not all entering the minimal couplings, which are singled out by contracting these AM by XM, you can easily see that they don't feel this transformation. Because this is equal to Z alpha psi alpha XM. XM is the M is the M over the index of the embedding tensor. The remaining ones, the remaining vector fields, which are vector fields not participating in the minimal couplings, well, we can dispose of by means of a gauge transformation of the alpha. They can, in quote, be eaten through a so-called anti-Higgs mechanism by the alpha. Okay? So, we can write the general form of the action in terms of these quantities, of these covariant quantities. Let me write down the final form of the bosonic action. I just focus on the bosonic action. So 1 over G times F is equal to minus R over 2. So plus 1/2 G RS phi d mu. And now we have to write d mu phi R d mu phi S. But these are H covariant derivatives of the scalar fields plus I lambda sigma H lambda H sigma mu divided by 4 plus R lambda sigma divided by 4 H lambda mu star H sigma mu. Okay? So the same as before. Plus L topological B plus L generalized tensile. Okay? Where L topological B is a topological term depending on B, which is minus 1/2 eta lambda alpha B alpha F lambda minus 1 over 4 eta lambda beta d. Okay? And L generalized tensileness. This generalizes the Witt-Lauer Swampinian term. X PQ. Okay, so this is you can verify that if you go to the electric frame, this reduces to the Witt-Lauer term that we have discussed last time. Okay, these are all terms which are needed for covariance, for general invariance, and you see that. Well, you can compute the variation of this action, which is the bosonic action, right? This contains only the bosonic fields. Then I didn't write the fermionic one, okay? If you vary this with respect to the fields, please tell me how much I have that. 5? Okay, good. If we vary this action with respect to the tensor field, you see it's proportional to beta lambda alpha, delta p alpha times x. So you see that this rank 2 tensor, the existence of this rank 2 tensor in the Lagrange is related to the magnetic component of the embedding. Okay? If we set this to 0, we get back to the electric frame, and the two forms simply disappear. Okay. 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 Then you can write down equations of motion. In particular, you write the variation with respect to the various fields, and this is the derivative of Gm delta An C Mn. Okay, and Zn alpha. If you write down the equation of motion, let's write directly the equations of motion. Then you have that E, G, I'm going to write to define these terms. M, this is equal to minus C Mn times star of Jn. Okay? Now, what this Gm is Gm is the vector, the symplectic vector consisting of H lambda and G lambda. The same that we would we have defined at the beginning, satisfying the twisted subduality condition. G, okay, where this G is the dual to H lambda, and it's not an independent field, but it's expressed in terms of H lambda and not the scalar, precisely as we defined the H test, the dual tensors previously in the engaged case. Okay. What is this Jn? Jn are the Noether currents of the scalar fields. Noether the Noether currents associated with the gauge generators as global symmetry generators. You know that any global symmetry generator in a Lagrange can associate a Noether current. Okay. Now, in particular, gauge generators are in particular global symmetry generators. Local symmetries are in particular global symmetries, and I can associate with them. Noether currents. Okay. So we can write these G. We can write these J and which are one forms as theta and alpha, J alpha. J alpha are the Noether currents associated with the T alpha. Okay? They are written like this. J alpha is equal to K alpha R G R S phi D of phi S. Okay? This is the covariant derivative of the scalar field. These are the killing vectors. Associated with the okay? Now you see that on the right hand side here, on the right hand side we have the Noether current. On the left hand side we have a free form because this is D of a 2 form. This is a star of a 1 form, which is a 3 form. Okay, so you see that this is expressed explicitly in manifestly G covariant way. Okay. All right. Now, another equation, which is the equation for the alpha, tell you another thing that this has to be 0. You see, there are two quantities with a lower lambda. This is the H lambda, which is D A lambda plus something else. This is the dual, and the equation of the alpha is telling us that this is nothing new. It has to be equal to the dual field strength. The dual field strength is function of H, sigma, and phi. It's a dual field strength. We want to start so this equation for V is telling us that the field strength for the magnetic vector fields, okay, they have to be coincide with the dual field strengths. The field strengths which are dual to H. G lambda are proportional to star of the variation of the Lagrange with respect to H. This is, I remind you that this is the definition of the dual. So the dual field strength, okay, which is well defined in terms of H lambda up and scalar fields like this, must be equal to the strength associated with the magnetic vector fields. So in this redundant formulation, G covariant formulation, which is manifested G covariant, you see the equations of motion are manifested G covariant, provided we transform the embedding tensor together with all the other fields, as we said at the beginning. But the price we have to pay is that we have to introduce new fields, redundancy. We have to introduce magnetic vector fields. We have to introduce two forms. But with these vector fields, okay, there are new gauge transformations associated. This guarantees that the number of propagating degrees of freedom is always the same. However, by fixing these gauge transformations in various ways, we can distribute these degrees of freedom among all the other all the fields in the game in various ways. Okay, so this is telling us something that we understand. Okay, namely that these magnetic field strengths are not new, but they must be coincide with the dual field strengths. This is telling us that, well, this contains both Bianchi identities and field equations. But you see, from here, we see that the Bianchi identities are satisfied for those fields which are associated with the gauge fields. These are singled out as usual by contracting the index n by xn. This is minus star j n xn. But jm is proportional to theta. And you see, if I go, and this is nothing but theta and beta, t beta, and this is 0 thanks to the quadratic locality condition. Is 0. So if I contract this equation by xn, I get 0. So that this means that the field strengths of our gauge vectors are consistently defined. But from the other component, however, of this equation gives us the field strength, the field equation for the. Now we can also use the Bianchi identity. The Bianchi identity to rewrite the right hand side, okay, as follows: Z M alpha H 3 alpha, right hand side, is equal to minus Z, well, theta m, or if you want star jm. Okay. So we can use the Bianchi identity to rewrite the equation for the vectors in this form. But you see, this is nothing but the duality relation between two forms and scalar fields. Because these are the Noether currents associated with global symmetry generators of the sigma model. So they depend on the derivative of the scalar fields. So these are nothing but the duality relation for the scalar fields. Okay? So you see that we can manage to write everything in a manifestly G-covariant way. Okay. Now there is one last thing I wanted to say. We have written down the variation of the tensor fields under gauge transformations, okay? We have written them contracted by Z and alpha, because the vector fields, the tensor fields only appear by contracted by Z. Okay? However, if we now use this variation and we vary H3 of alpha uncontracted, corresponding to this strength, uncontracted, what we see is that we get a covariant H3 alpha, a covariant variation, which is fine. However, plus we also get another term, alpha and beta, some phi and beta, depending on various things. So the variation, the gauge variation of the field strength of the two forms has a covariant terms that we like, but something that we don't like, non-covariant, just as for as it was for the one form. Okay. So, and this is proportional to a characteristic tensor, which now is not Z, but I call Y. Okay, it's a characteristic tensor, and has the problem that has the properties that Zm alpha, Y alpha, and beta is equal to 0. So this, when contracted by Zm alpha, is equal to 0. So we didn't see this because before we computed everything contracted by Zm alpha. So if you contract this by Zm alpha, you don't see this because this is in the kernel of this tensor. Okay. However, if we want to write the variation, a covariant variation of the field strengths of the two forms, okay. Well, we have to dispose of this extra term proportional to Y. How do we do that? Well, we follow the same procedure as before, as we did for one form. Namely, we couple the two forms to three forms, and so on.
We're in four dimensions, right? We're in four dimensions.
We are in 4 dimensions, yes.
But these are forms in space.
In space-time. So these are,
How far does it go?
it cannot go so far. No. I promise I finish in a moment.
No. I mean,
No, it cannot because it stops, clearly it stops at the 4. Okay, so we are now coupling this to a 3 form, which is not going to be dynamical. But you need it in order for the whole thing to be provided. Okay? So we define H3 alpha, okay, as GV alpha plus blah 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 plus Y alpha and beta times C3 beta n. Okay, so we couple the two forms to three forms so that the variation of this C3 beta n contains minus phi beta n plus other things. So you see, the variation of this C3 precisely cancels the non-covariant part in the variation of the previous field strength. Okay? So this guarantees that the new field strength, defined in this way by combining the old one with a three-fold through this tensor here, characteristic tensor, okay, it is combined. However, as C3, being a massless tensor, should be associated with a symmetry, gauge symmetry, described now by a 2 form with the same index structure plus something else. And the lower order form should transform under this new transformation, under gauge transformation associated with the higher order form. Okay. So you see that here invariance of the theory requires, in particular, the need to define covariant objects requires coupling the lower order form to higher order form through characteristic tensors, which we call Z or Y, which are linear in the embedding tensor. You can directly compute Y, and it is linear in the embedding tensor. Y depends on the embedding tensor, is linear in theta, and is obtained from theta by applying through some invariant tensor, G invariant tensor. Okay, so is in the same representation as theta. The theta, you can verify that Y alpha and beta is equal to theta m gamma f alpha gamma beta plus t alpha m n theta m beta. Okay? And you can easily verify that Z alpha, Z p alpha, Y alpha, M beta is equal to 0. Check. Using the quadratic constraint, you find the quadratic constraint. Okay? So, summarizing everything, what we find is that if we in order to construct a manifestly G-covariant G-covariant formulation of the gauge theory, we need to couple lower order forms to higher order ones through tensors which are in the same representation of theta. They are obtained by combining theta with invariant tensors, like this. Okay? Now, what we see is that the Bianchi identity for each form are not satisfied in general. As we see, for one form, the Bianchi identities were not satisfied for all of them, but only for those entering the minimal couplings. Okay? The others, no. But those for which the Bianchi identities are not satisfied, which are forms which are not well defined, okay, nevertheless, these are precisely those forms which feel the gauge transformation of the higher order form. So they can be disposed of. These lower forms which are not well defined can be disposed of by gauge transformation of the higher order forms they couple. This is the main catch. Okay, so Bianchi identities for P forms are not well defined, not for all, are not satisfied, not for all the P forms. Okay, but those P forms for which Bianchi identities are not well defined, are not satisfied, and therefore which are not well defined, they feel the gauge transformation of the higher order forms. And therefore, they can be disposed of by a gauge transformation of the higher order form. For instance, those vector fields, which are not well defined because their Bianchi identities are not satisfied, they are the vector fields along the directions along which the Jacobi identity is not satisfied. Okay. Well, these are precisely those vector fields which feel the gauge variation, which transform under the gauge variation of the two forms. And so they can be disposed of by a gauge transformation of the two forms. I have 2 more seconds. I just show this for the one forms, and then I stop here. Or I'm over time. No, then I would stop here. So this is the main idea. Okay. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry for being over time. Okay. Yeah. The anti-Higgs mechanism. Okay. Thanks for asking. This is what I wanted to do. Well, look, here we have an inflation of indices. So it's very easy to get lost among all these indices. However, there is a trick which allows you to get rid of all these indices, okay, and define the essentials. This trick is called rank factorization of theta. Let me do this because it allows really to simplify matters. Otherwise, if you read the literature, there are a lot of indices. So we have theta, which is a rectangular matrix. Okay. Now, any rectangular matrix can be written in the rank factorization. Rank R, where I also want to the rank of this object. Okay. Then we have C and N, theta and alpha, theta and beta equals 0. This implies that C and N, psi and I, psi and j equals 0. So this means that these define an isotropic subspace in a symplectic space. Okay, so the number r cannot exceed n1. We know from general basic symplectic algebra, linear symplectic algebra. Okay, so using this, let me consider the case in which, for the sake of simplicity, r is equal to n1. Then we can define some dual psi n with low index psi, such that psi n, psi n j is equal to delta ij, and these are mutual problems. Okay. Now you see that from this definition, you immediately define what is the matrix E minus 1, m half is equal to psi m I psi I. So this is the matrix symplectic matrix. You can verify that it is symplectic. That brings you to the electric frame, and I is what we call lambda half. Okay, so this is very simple. Now we can decompose AM into this basis. So writing it as AI plus psi mi AI. Okay? This is just a decomposition in this space. This is the basis of this linear vector space. Okay? So this way you can do that. So let's write HM now in these spaces. This is psi m I fi plus psi m I fi, I'm just expanding the f part, plus now we have the z part plus 1/2 theta n alpha d alpha. Now this theta I write it using the rank factorization. And you see that this becomes psi m I eta I alpha d alpha. Let me call this pi. So now you see that this is easily written as psi mi fi plus 1/2 pi plus psi mi fi. From here, it is clear which are the vector fields which couple and field which couple to the two. From here, it is clear which are the vector fields which couple and field which couple to the two forms and field the tensor transformation of the forms and the Higgs mechanism, and which do not. These are the electric vector fields. You see, they are not coupled to the two forms. These are the magnetic in the electric frame of the embedded tensor. And these do couple to Bi, and they feel the transformation of Bi. Delta Fi is basically T psi 1I plus. Okay? So if I do this transformation, the transformation associated with Bi, you see that I can get rid of Fi. And then this becomes B prime I. So if I make a transformation, Bi and Fi, gauge transformation associated with Bi, there is an anti-Higgs mechanism, and this becomes a massive two-fold. Fi is eaten by Bi. This is left alone. Using the rank factorization, you really see what are the electric fields, the true electric field strengths, those which do not couple, which are well defined, which do not couple to the two forms, and all the others which couple to the two forms. They are not well defined, but you can dispose of them by means of a gauge transformation associated with the high rank. Okay? And you can play with this game with all the high rank forms. And you see that all the high rank forms split in two parts. Those which are well defined, and those which are not well defined but feel the gauge transformation of the higher rank ones. Okay? Does it answer your question? Sorry for everything over time.
Alright, so I guess this concludes Mario's lectures. So let's give a thanks to Mario. And well, this concludes the lectures of the school as well. So let's thank all our lecturers, so Jakub, Sam, and Mario for their efforts. And of course, this afternoon we've kind of left it a little bit free. So if there's a need for discussions, we can have lunch, and then people can come up here, and we'll still plan to make a little bit of coffee later for those who are still here. So there's no need to run home. But okay, if you do need to go home, then thanks for coming, and it was nice that you made it. But always very welcome to stay in the afternoon, and we'll be having discussions with more details than we could get to. But otherwise, yeah, lunch is as usual downstairs. I see people have luggage, so we'll probably lock this room in case we don't carry it down to lunch. And then I have an exam to attend to from 1:30 to 3, so I'll be back at 3. But I'll leave the key maybe with Ivania perhaps, and so that if you need something from the room or the room after lunch, then you can talk to Ivania. Okay. Okay, great. So well, thanks again, and thanks to you. You can see Hector has been helping with Ivania and Yannick, who is our honorary UP member. I've also been helping very much with the coffee breaks and preparing everything, so thank you. And Vishnu, as you probably all know, is the reason that we're here, given that he applied for the funding. And so, yeah, hopefully the lectures will eventually become available, maybe not next week, but in a couple of weeks. So I will send an email to everybody when we have the lectures up on the website. Okay, thanks everybody, and well, I'll see you downstairs for lunch.